There's a lot of social pressure, actually,
Yeah.
to immediately laugh off any conspiracy theory if it's done by the bad guys, right? You will quickly get mocked and laughed at and not taken seriously if you give any credence. Back the lab leak was a good one where it's like, turned out that was at least very credible, if not true. And that was a perfect example of one where when it first came out, and not only so Bret Weinstein talked about it. And then I, in a totally different conversation, said something complimentary about him on a totally different subject. And people were saying, Tim, you might have gone a little off the deep end. You're like quoting someone who is like a lab leak person. So I was getting my reputation dinged for complimenting on a different topic someone whose reputation was totally sullied because they had, they questioned an orthodoxy. Right. So you see, so what does that make me want to do? Distance myself from Bret Weinstein. That's at least that's the incentive. And what does that make other people want to do? Don't become the next Bret Weinstein. Don't say it out loud because you don't want to become someone that no one wants to compliment anymore, right? You can see the social pressure, and of course, when there is a conspiracy, that social pressure is its best friend.
Because then they see the people from outside are seeing that social pressure enact. Like a Tim Urban becoming more and more and more extreme to the other side, and so they're going to take the more and more and more extreme. What do you see that the pandemic did, that COVID did to our civilization in that regard, in the forces? Why was it so divisive? Do you understand that?
Yeah. So COVID, I thought might be, we always, the ultimate example of a topic that will unite us all is the alien attack.
Yeah.
Although honestly, I don't even have that much faith then. I think there'd be like some people are super like, pro-alien and some people are anti-alien. But anyway.
I was actually sorry to interrupt because I was talking to a few astronomers, and they're the first folks that made me kind of sad in that if we discover life on Mars, for example, that there's going to be potentially a division over that too, where half the people will not believe that's real.
Well, because we live in a current society where the political divide has subsumed everything. And that's not always like that. It goes into stages like that. We're in a really bad one where it's, I actually, in the book, I call it like a vortex, like almost like a whirlpool that pulls everything into it. It pulls, and so normally you'd say, okay, immigration, naturally going to be contentious. That's always political, right?
Yeah.
But like COVID seemed like, oh, that's one of those that will unite us all. Let's fight this not human virus thing. Like obvious is no one's sensitive. No one's like getting hurt when we insult the virus. Like let's all we have this threat, this common threat that's a threat to everyone of every nationality in every country, every ethnicity. And what it didn't do that at all. The whirlpool was too powerful. So it pulled COVID in, and suddenly masks, if you're on the left, you like them. If you're on the right, you hate them. And suddenly lockdowns, if you're on the left, you like them, and on the right, you hate them. And vaccines, people forget this. When Trump first started talking about the vaccine, Biden, Harris, Cuomo, they're all saying, I'm not taking that vaccine, not from this CDC.
Because it was too rushed or something like that?
No, but because I'm not trusting anything that Trump says. Trump wants me to take it, I'm not taking it. Yeah. I'm not taking it from this CDC. So Trump was almost out of office, but at the time, if Trump had been in, it would have been, I'm pretty sure it would have stayed. Right likes vaccines, the left doesn't like vaccines. Instead, the president switched. And all those people are suddenly saying, they were actually specifically saying that if if you're saying the CDC is not trustworthy, that's misinformation, which is exactly what they were saying about the other CDC. And they were saying it because they genuinely didn't trust Trump, which is fair. But now when other people don't trust the Biden CDC, suddenly it's this kind of misinformation that needs to be censored. So it was a sad moment because it was a couple of months at the very, even a week or so a month or so at the very beginning when it felt like a lot of our other squabbles were kind of like, oh, I feel like they're kind of irrelevant right now.
Yeah.
And then very quickly the whirlpool sucked it in. And in a way where I think it damaged the reputation of a lot of the trust in a lot of these institutions for the long run.
But there's also an individual psychological impact. It's like a vicious negative feedback cycle where they were deeply affected on an emotional level and people just were not their best selves.
That's definitely true. Yeah. I mean, talk about the primitive mind. I mean, one thing that we've been dealing with for our whole human history is pathogens.
Yeah.
And it's emotional, right? It brings out, there's really interesting studies where like if when they study the phenomenon of disgust, which is one of these like smiling is universal.
Mhm.
You don't have to ever translate a smile, right? Certain, throwing your hands up when your sports team wins is universal because it's part of our coding. And so is disgust, to kind of make this like, face where you wrinkle up your nose and you kind of put out your tongue and maybe even gag. That's to expel whatever, because it's the reaction when something is potentially a pathogen that might harm us,
Mhm.
right? Feces, vomit, whatever. But they did this interesting study where people who in two groups, the control group, was shown images of, and I might be getting two studies mixed up, but they were showing images of like car crashes and like disturbing but not disgusting, and the other one was showing like rotting things and just things that were disgusting. And then they were asked about immigration. These were Canadians, and the group that had the disgust feeling pulsing through their body was way more likely to prefer like immigrants from white countries. And the group that had been shown car accidents, they still preferred the groups from white countries, but much less so. And so what does that mean? It's because the disgust impulse makes us scared of, sexual practices that are foreign, of ethnicities that don't look like us, of it stokes xenophobia. So it's ugly. It's this really ugly stuff. This is, of course, also how, the Nazi propaganda with cockroaches and or it was the Rwandan was cockroaches, the Nazis was rats, and it's specifically, it's a dehumanizing emotion. So anyway, we were talking about COVID, but I think it taps deep into like the human psyche, and I don't think it brings out our I think it, like you said, I think it brings out an ugly side in us.